Clay paints are easy to make, they're cheap and affordable, they're non-toxic, and they're really beautiful. They change the feeling of your home and you can get whatever texture and look you like.
Let's do it. This is the room that we going to do the new color. We like the color, but it seemed like a little bit too dark. So we want to try a different color.
So to start making paint, we start by making the glue. And the glue can be made by any kind of flour. You can use wheat flour, rice flour. You want it to be white flour, not whole grain, for the stickiness. And we like to use tapioca flour. It's cheap and nice and sticky. So you're going to mix that into cold water first and dissolve it. The normal recipe is 1 kilo for 12 liters if you're doing a big batch. But you'll see how this feels and you'll know what it's supposed to feel like. You can also make it thicker or thinner depending on how you like it. You have to get the water to a boil first, and you want that at a raging boil. And then you're going to pour your dissolved mixture in while you stir. And if your water is hot enough, it should change from white. If you're using tapioca, it will change from white to clear immediately, and then you know it's cooked. If it stays, and then you're finished, you can turn it off and use it. But if it stays white, it means it hasn't cooked. So you need to cook it a little longer. And it's gonna be sticky. You can feel that it thickens. It's gonna get thicker as it cools. But you can also feel this is a real sticky mucus feeling. This is what's gonna seal the paint and make it really hard.
Clay color is very unique because the color of clay everywhere is different. Wherever you go, you can see different color. If you like it, take it back home. There are 2 ways to process the clay before we use. The first way is we grind it when it dry and sift it, and even get dry powder clay we can use as a powder. Another way is dissolve with the water, 1 part of clay, 5 parts of water at least. Dissolve it and then strain it with very fine strainer. And even get muddy clay. Let the muddy clay settle. When the water separates from the clay, we pour the water out many times until we get beautiful clay color. We can use as is wet clay. Clay color is very soft to your eye. Very nice and gentle.
Making clay paints, we have 4 main ingredients. What you're gonna need for sure is clay, and you're gonna need sand. You need water and glue. For the clay is important because it's what strengthens the paint, and it's also gonna be what gives it its color. If you don't like the color of clay you have, you can also add pigments to it. But you can see these are clays from our local area, and they're all really beautiful. You can mix them with a white clay to make it a lighter color, and play with the color coming from the clay, and that's what hardens it. The sand is important because sand is what's going to stop the clay from cracking when it dries. So for sand, this is very fine. This is silica sand. We purchased this, but you can also sometimes find very fine sand on the side of the road or something around you. You can use that too. We need water just to mix together to make the right consistency. And then we use the glue that we made earlier. The glue is going to harden it and stop it from dusting in the end. So that's what changes it into what we call a paint, because it's not a plaster. It won't have any dusting anymore, and it'll be hard and durable. If you want, you can also add additives like chopped straw or mica. So if this is something that's easy for you to get, this can also be really beautiful and add sheen or different colors to it or textures. So right now I'm gonna try out with the colors we have and see what colors we can make and what we want to use. Samples that we've done with the colors we have. Here's the purplish clay and the reddish clay, and this is the same mix but with more white added and more white added, so you can see how that changes the tone. Always put samples up because they always turn out a little bit different, and always wait until they're dry before you make a decision. So you can see here, it will change color quite a lot. Sometimes it'll turn dark and then light again. It can change quite a lot. So wait till it's fully dry before you're going to choose which one you're going to do, and make samples that are in the light and then also in the dark in your room, because it's going to change the color quite a lot depending on if the light is on it and at different times of the day, how that works. The other thing we've done to the room is just prepare it just like you would for a paint job, with taping up the areas on the edges and on the bottoms. You can wash clay paint off, so you don't have to use this, but it just makes it easy and makes a nice clean line when we want to take that off later. We're ready to mix. So like we explained before, for paint, you're going to have a mixture of your clay and your sand, and then we're going to add the glue. So we're always going to mix the clay and sand together first. Sometimes your clay and sand are dry, sometimes they're wet. It doesn't matter, but you want them to be thoroughly mixed first. We're always going to usually we use at least 1 part of sand to 1 part of clay. The sand will stop it from cracking. So if you're having problems with your samples cracking, make sure to just do them again with more sand and try to see. If you had too much sand and not enough clay, then it can get sandy to the touch and also start to dust off a little bit if the sand doesn't bind into the clay. So for our mixture, we decided on the light orange color, the medium one. So that's going to be a mixture of 1 part orange clay, 1 part white clay, and 1 part sand. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix those all together dry, and then we'll see what we do with it from there. If you're mixing 2 colors of clay together, make sure to mix them first, because especially if they're dry, they're going to be light and fluffy and easy to mix, and you want to get them fully mixed to get the color consistency. Then after this, we're ready to add in the sand. If you have all dry ingredients, it's quite easy to mix it on a tarp as well. You could see that our bucket was getting too full before, so we had to pour it out onto this tarp and then mix it around that way as well. And then you make sure that you really have a good color consistency. We doubled this recipe, so it was 2 parts orange clay, 2 parts white clay, and 2 parts sand. And so that just to make sure we have enough. And at this point, what we wanted to do was separate the mix, because once we've added water and tapioca flour, it's harder to keep it. It's going to go bad over time because it's food. So, but if we separate the mix out right now, then if we need more mix later, or if we want to do touch-ups on the wall afterwards, we can just use this mix again. So this is about the texture we want to start with. It's quite thick. If you think of paint, this is quite thick, but we know that the wall that we're going on today is pretty rough. So it really depends on the texture of the wall you're going on, how much it's going to cover also, which is why it's difficult to give a recipe for how much paint it's going to take per square footage. So for us, we're going to just be trying it out, and that's why we made some extra. What we're going to do at the beginning is we want to apply it. So we're going to put it on the wall, and we just want to see how it goes. We love to apply with our hands. It's really the most satisfying way. You can also make it thinner and use a brush, or if you wanted to make it a little thicker, then you could use a trowel and get that really smooth texture from trowel marks or from no marks at all. I like the way that this is going on. You could add a little bit of water if you want it to smooth over more easily, but because this is quite a rough wall, we want it to get good coverage, and we want it to cover all these little indentations. So I would say this is good texture, and we're ready to go with it. When you apply, you want to do it with the palm of your hand. So you want to push up on it so you get less hand marks, and decide what kind of texture you're going to go for. Are you going to do circles, or are you going to what are you going to go for? You can do whatever you want. You can also, of course, add texture if you want. If you're going for smooth, you want to do just circular motions or some consistent motion. And then after it's set a little bit and dried, you can come back when it's leather hard and buff out some of this texture here that we can't get out at the moment while it's still wet. And we'll show you that. So when it's kind of leather hard, but not completely hard yet, you can use your hand dipped in water to smooth it out and get out the hand marks that you had in the wall from before. Depending on the texture of your wall, you may do this when it's a bit more dry or a bit more wet, and you just have to feel it out as you go. So when you finished painting and it's a little bit dry, you have a couple options for smoothing it. You can do it wet like we showed before with a wet hand, or you can let it kind of become leather dry and then just buff it with your hand dry, and that'll get some of the extra lines out, and it'll also just get a little bit of the extra sand that maybe didn't quite stick to the wall off, so that that doesn't dust at all later. Paint is quite thick and it's gone over the tape. You want to cut it with an exacto knife or a cutter just before. You want to cut the tape first before you pull it, because if there's tape under there and you pull it, it's going to crack and pull up your plaster. So just find whatever line you want that to be at. Cut that with your exacto knife. Oh. And then when you pull, that will be your nice line.
Clay paint can be used on the drywall or concrete wall, or adobe wall is fine. And then it gives a good texture. If you want to change your color of your house, clay paint is a good choice.
The orange clay came out really nice. It's got a lot of depth and it reflects the light really nicely. What you'll find with the clay paints is they often have a lot more texture and depth in the color, which makes a really warm, beautiful feeling in the room. So we're really happy with it. It's a keeper. And you can do as many coats as you like to get the texture you like in your place and play with it. That's all it is.